So to kill a mockingbird would be to place your gun, and to aim to place your crosshair at a mockingbird would be to question the role, the impact, and the essence of naivete in life, and how if that is lost, then what is created in its void, or what new is generated to replace that innocence.
Initially, she had Calpurnia and her another school teachers in her life as female figures, like guiding female figures. But when she started communicating with Miss Maudie, she had this, her presence is also described as very warm.
Negative worldview will not necessarily happen by seeing the bad things of the world. It happens when, after seeing the bad things of the world, nobody gives you a perspective.
So let's begin. Can I get some thumbs up so now we can start? Okay. So firstly, we're going to discuss about the basic education system that is there in the place that it's maycomb ke bare mein. The education system that is there wahan pe, and the teachers that these people had, the behavior of the teachers. So you remember starting में जब उनकी जो नई teacher आती है, let me just do one thing. So the quiz का एक question पूछता हूँ मैं. Does anybody remember the name of the teacher? Can I ask Kritisha? You don't know anything. God, this woman. Anurag, sorry. What was the name of the teacher?
Chandler? No, bro, I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay. Anybody remembers? I'm just asking.
Was it Catherine?
Caroline Fisher. Caroline Fisher.
No.
It was close. You're not getting any gifts. Sorry. Anyways, yeah. So basically, Caroline Fisher was the teacher that they had. So she was a new one, as we know. She's young. She's new. And you remember Walter Cunningham jo hota hai, she gives him a penny or something. Jao khana kha lo jaake. And then Scout points out ki matlab, ma'am, don't give this money to him. He's a Cunningham. He won't take this money from you. And also another thing that happened was ki she told her that, ma'am, I already know how to read. And because of these 2-3 incidences, what happens was this teacher got offended. So why do you think this teacher got offended?
Schools that time were very regimentarian, and what Harper Lee does in the book, like every social setting she's trying to show in Maycomb, Alabama, she's trying to show the kind of regimentarian, boxed in, and I would say more conventional or traditional mindset, which is very rigid. So that also comes across from the school. So because these are children, they are used as devices to show that how innocence could be corrupted in small town America of the 30s due to racial prejudices. But you start from a school because that's where children will spend most of their time, and so on.
That's especially in the impressionable age that they are in.
And 30s is actually the depression, also economic depression. So you also have those. Maybe she's not a teacher. Maybe she just come here to. I mean, in the setting till then, we don't know this woman's motivations also, right? So that depression era setting.
Assume that. Yeah. Yes. So what do you think this tells us about the education system? And is there any resemblance to today's system, like the talk about homogeneity? Ki matlab tum ghar pe seekhte hoge, wo band kar do. You're going to learn the way I am teaching you over here. So what does it tell us about the education system and the teachers that we have today?
I think that is the case today itself. I mean, it's not just something that existed in 1930s. Because, a lot of teachers these days are good. They recognize that each child is an individual and each child has to be handled a little differently. But some teachers still feel that, okay, teaching has to happen as per rule A, B, C, D. And any deviation to those rules feels like a challenge to them.
Yeah, I had what I had to say was opposite to Tarik. So I feel the teachers now appreciate if the students, know something else as well when they collect information from outside and they present some new perspective. And another thing is that our education system, at least in India, now has become such that you have to do self-learning, and what you're taught in school is absolutely useless.
I still think that, even today, a lot of schools focus on collectivism a lot more. Like they look at it as one unit. So that sort of brings me to the next question that I was supposed to discuss. Like, what do you think is the extent to which a teacher should have an impact on a student? Like, should her work and should her focus only be towards academics? Or, it could, and it's good if it extends to their behavior or personal growth as well?
I mean, it boils down to how we understand the system of schooling. I mean, I always feel a little awkward when someone refers to a school as an XYZ factory or something like that, when the output is not supposed to be uniform per se. I mean, it's better if we start understanding schools as places where sculptures get made and where each sculpture needs specific attention instead of having a single
Yeah.
involvement of everything.
Yeah, like the way, the approach that they have towards the students, right?
But for coaching institutes, they say that they're engineering factories, they are CA factories. I mean, these marketing slogans seem counterintuitive. I don't know why people buy into them.
They tend to mix the part of education and training, the difference between the two many a times.
Yeah, so we are so acquainted with the phrase out of the box now, which is why like we know that somewhere school doesn't matter. आगे जाके कोई नहीं पूछेगा which school were you from, except if you are from Jamnabai or something. But otherwise, nobody is going to ask you anything. So that is why even teachers know now that you have to be somewhat different, or you have to actually build your personality to stand out differently. So that's something that teachers ideally should think, and I don't know where our system is right now, but we are heading somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, so as in the role of school, so I think the best way to look at it is through the work of this intellectual thinker called Paulo Freire. He talked about pedagogy, teaching, and the ways regimentarian teaching or insular teaching actually reinforces the rigidity of not being open to a lot of views or not being liberal enough in your outlook. Because what Freire says is what school should teach you is the ability to learn new things and the ability to question and be critical in your approach and thought towards the world. But what schools might end up doing, or what they shouldn't be doing, is what ironically they end up doing, is trying to create, say, a place of order where we've grown. All of us have grown up in schools where keep quiet, finger on your lips. All of those are phrases which we've been hearing since childhood. On one hand, it is difficult to control a group of human beings. Like one person is intelligent, a group is stupid. So that kind of contrast and tussle is always there in schooling. And in India, we are suckers for rules. Our bureaucratic systems also seep into schooling, and then it becomes a bureaucracy for itself. So all of these issues should go away. But I mean, the internet has democratized learning to an extent, so maybe that could change schools.
Yeah.
But in tier 2,
Like a
tier
global
3 cities,
platform.
in villages where teachers aren't there, I'm not so sure what's going to happen.
But like, don't you think that जो ये digitalization की वजह से और forms of education आ रहे हैं, उसकी वजह से maybe the schooling का point कम हो जा रहा है?
So no, the point of schooling can never go away, because not just schooling does not inculcate within you an academic structured way of learning and imbibing information. It also helps you learn how to live in a society, how to thrive in a social surroundings where you're constantly interacting and spending time with people your age. And how do you thrive in, so I mean, someone could question this as being counterintuitive and saying, why should we be integrated into systems against our will? But I think the purpose of a school should be to ensure when kids are growing up, they can be part of a society, or at least know their roles within it to shape it.
Yeah, I mean, schools do matter, right? I mean, teachers also matter. When we talk about schools mattering, we simply restrict ourselves to the promotion of social interaction from a young age. But teachers do matter. I mean, I'm sure all of us at some point in our schooling, even if we were in not so good schools, we would have experienced a few teachers who have really touched us, who have really showed us some compassion, and who have left really a permanent mark on us. Now, imagine taking that experience away from a child. They would know how to solve algebraic expressions when they passed 10th standard, but they would not have known the feeling it is to be actually touched by a human that is not your family. And even Atticus Finch recognizes this. He recognizes the limitations of schooling in Maycomb County, yet he insists that Scout adjusts to it, and she attunes to it, and she still goes to school.
Right. We actually have a question for that later on as well. Anyway, this next thing that I wanted to go on, when Scout is explaining to the teacher that, he's a Cunningham, he doesn't have the money and he won't even accept it from you. Do you think she's being sympathetic towards Cunningham? Like, what is the point of, where does she come from when she tries to explain it to the teacher?
What I felt was the tone in which she explained the teacher, it was more informative than anything else. I remember there was some line where she felt, I think I have more information regarding the Cunningham tribe or Cunningham clan something. So I think I should tell ma'am about this. You know, कि इसको उनको पता नहीं होगा. Let me just tell this about her. I don't think she was being sympathetic at all. It was just the fact that I think ma'am is new away. I should help her out. But the fact that this opinionatedness is frowned upon by ma'am, by the teacher herself. I think that's why she got offended also. कि मतलब, like, are you going to teach me what's right, what's wrong, and ऐसे करके. It was not sympathetic according to me. Okay, so another thing that I just want to point it out to you guys was, as we're discussing this, what impact do teachers have on kids? If you remember another teacher that they had, Miss Gates. Miss Gates, there was this hypocrisy of her that I think not me, sorry, Scout brought it out, but she did not know how to address it. When they were discussing about Hitler in school, she was like, Hitler ne bahut galat kiya, and everything she was telling. And then outside the church or somewhere, I think she was like, I think these blacks need to be taught a lesson or something. So like, it just showed how much of an impact can a teacher have. A teacher's contradicting views can have on an impressionable kid.
Also, most people, whatever they're teaching or preaching for that matter, don't really follow that, right? So, or don't really understand the core idea of history and use it. They just study it for the sake of studying it. Moving on to Scout and Calpurnia, absolutely. See, I personally loved their banter, that they had. It was very typical because I have a smaller sister, so I know how defensive she can get, So I think from there only I had this question as to, did Scout resent Calpurnia in the beginning? Like, did she not like her per se? And whether it changed over the course of the story?
No, I don't think that her name, Scout, yeah, she didn't resent Calpurnia as such, but she had I read it a little while back, so I don't remember correctly. But it was more of that she thought that Jem was allowed a lot of things that she was not, and that was sort of an issue that she had. In the scene that you see where she takes the kids to the church, to the black people's church that is there, you'll see that at that time when Scout notices what all she is doing, and after that the conversation that they have about how Calpurnia behaves in different ways in two different places, that sort of develops the respect that Scout has for Calpurnia.
I think that was the part where actually she saw the human side of Calpurnia.
Yeah, like she's not all bad. She is nice person. Yeah.
So she also resented her because after her mother died, a stronger female figure took place somewhat. So that was a big reason. So you see, Atticus respected her a lot, and some other female figure is there who Scout's brother is also respecting so much. So that suddenly has an impact on her that maybe someone is taking her mother's place, and kids don't want that. At least not 5 to 6-year-olds.
Actually, that part about the fact that Calpurnia might be taking her mother's place, and that's why Scout got there, that didn't really occur to me actually. And it also brought me to thinking, like, what do you think Calpurnia thought of like Scout, like dealing with it? Did she think of Scout as a spoiled child or like somebody who needs to be
the relationship between Scout and Calpurnia was very natural. I mean, like, whenever Calpurnia asked her to do something, like, you have to do this and you can't do this, she used to listen. She didn't think that she is an outsider of the family. And same was the case with Calpurnia's perception of Scout. She always tried to right the wrongs of Scout in a good way, in a motherly manner.
Okay, so let's talk a little about Jem as a character and how Jem grew or changed over the years. So over the years, what we see is that I think so it is because of the puberty thing that is hitting him. But so Jem is changing as a person, right? So over the years, how do you think his opinions about Scout changed?
Yeah, so I'll just bring one perspective here. There are a lot of ways in which both are sharing each other's lives and commenting on also each other while they're playing and or messing around Boo's house and all of that. But one perspective here is that before he goes into the throes of that adolescent angst and all of that, Jem actually kind of berates his sister for actually not like being more ladylike rather than actually just being a normal kid who wants to like snoop around the neighborhood or take part in so-called adventures with him or meet their friend who comes during the summers and hang out with them and kind of spend their times during the vacation. But when he's kind of caught in the throes of his adolescence and puberty starts hitting him slowly, he transforms and actually starts like berating and scolding his scout and telling him, you should be more ladylike. Why are you raising your voice now?
But like, see, these were the, I don't know if we can say it negative aspects of it, but these are the things that, you know, changed as in like negative sense में थोड़ा शायद से एक तरीके से towards Scout. But like there were also a few positive changes that happened in Jem, right? He became more opinionated, more observant about surroundings. Can you give some instances like where you felt like, no, he's becoming a man now, like an opinionated and observant person? Okay, so I'll try giving one. So if you remember, obviously that the scene वो जेल के वहाँ पे, तो वहाँ पे he's like कि मतलब even if his dad is telling him कि मतलब just go away now, then still he's not. He's like, no, I'm gonna stand my ground. I'm gonna be here. So it just showed like his idols are so firm now that his dad can also not change them. You know, that was one that was there. If any else you can think of?
When they stopped with the play acts of Boo Radley, that also somehow showed that he is actually coming out of all these childishness or having a bad image of Boo Radley or something like that. He started taking responsibility of him being an elder brother, and he has to actually become opinionated and study about things that are going around. That's why he started reading a lot, the
True.
newspapers and everything. And also about the passion for football, that was something that remained constant, and that's why he started reading in the first place. And then he realized that I have to read about other things as well.
I think that that played a very important part. कि मतलब I think his attention deviated from Boo Radley and his stuff to football and
Something
other
else,
things.
right?
Yeah, like
And
at the
also,
end
I
also.
like the part. I
Yeah,
like the
go ahead.
part like while the trial in court, he knew every step that his father was taking. Even that showed a mature part of him that he knows what's
And he's
going
trying to
on.
understand at the same time.
Right.
Like when जब वो केस खत्म होता है उसके बाद he's like कैसे ये मतलब हार गया, he was it's wrong and like we don't have a judge of our own. This dad is like, yeah, good that you realize that, now let's do something about it, something, you know. So he's questioning things. That just showed how he's getting mature. He's actually getting mature about it. Just a small incident that happened, I'll really quickly bring this up. So if you remember Nathan Radley was Boo Radley's elder brother, जो उसके साथ रहने आ गया था बाद में, right? हाँ. So if you remember, जब जो ट्री के वो उसमें होल के अंदर things used to be given, I think Boo Radley देता था उसको. So I think Jem had sent this letter, thank you, appreciating letter to them कि मतलब thank you for giving this something. And after that, the next year something वहाँ पे वो cement लगा दिया था Nathan Radley ने. And when Jem asked कि मतलब like why did you do this? Then he's like, this tree was dying, so I had to do this. And then Atticus से जब बात की उनने कि मतलब I think वो Jem ने बात की कि मतलब ये मर रहा था क्या tree actually? So he's like, no, this tree is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the tree. But then he was like, okay, maybe Nathan Bradley knows better than me. But like I think Jem was disturbed by this incident somehow. And if you remember the way the chapter ended, he was crying by the end of the chapter. Why do you think? How do you think this thing actually affected him? What was the reason for him for this mental breakdown that he had?
I also didn't really know why he had that emotional outburst. I was also hoping for an answer.
I guess it was maybe because they had sort of a connection, you know. He used to keep the gifts in the tree's bark, and these guys used to take it away, and there was this sort of a communication that happened, not literally, but like not
True.
physically, but yeah, they had this sort of a bond, and he must have hoped that someday he would actually get to talk to these persons, but that didn't happen. So maybe because of that.
I think it could also be because the way Nathan Radley and Radley family behave with them कि मतलब कोई ढंग से बात करता नहीं, इतना rude. Why are you so rude? Like, why are you lying to me? You know, like ऐसे betrayal कि मतलब what's the need to lie to me? You know, like, something like that could also be there. Instinctively इसको आया शायद.
Yeah, just one point. Yeah,
Yeah.
I also think that because he's also trying to actually figure out how much he knows of the world and how much he basically see. All of us when we're growing up, we have this tendency to try to guess, to try to excel at a sort of amateur guesswork where we know कि यार ये situation कहाँ जा रहा है या हमें पता है क्या होने वाला है. When you suddenly what happens is contravened by your expectations of what is going to happen, and that can create a crisis in somebody who's actually already struggling with self identity and self purpose.
That's true. That could be that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he was being an adolescent and all of those feelings and everything coming together and everything.
So the
Right.
facade of how the world works rather than how it won't listen to you is what
Turned
maybe
out,
made him. Yeah.
yeah.
Moving on to the character of Miss Maudie. So what do you think, what made Scout so comfortable with Miss Maudie? What was it about her, that sort of provided her this kind of an escape? Even the kitty parties that Aunt Alexandra used to organize, like Scout used to mention that she's able to go through it just because she gets to sit next to Miss Maudie, or if she gets to sit next to her. So what do you think she felt?
Miss Maudie, so initially she had Calpurnia and her another school teachers in her life as female figures, like guiding female figures. But when she started communicating with Miss Maudie, she had this, her presence is also described as very warm in the book. She's this nice person, gets along with Scout and Gem. I think she also keeps the lemon juice or something like that in her
Yeah, cakes and
courtyard or
lemon
something,
juice.
right? Yeah. So she got very comfortable with her, and then I think she let her wear that sun hat. My descriptions might be very bad because I've not read it in like 2 months.
Okay.
So, but yeah, so she let her do the things that Scout liked. She never pointed out on the boyishness that Scout's behavior had.
I think I agree with Nilangi. Like Miss Maudie was in a lot of ways on the same frequency as Atticus. So because she respected Atticus, she respected Miss Maudie.
I guess the only sign that I saw to show how close they were was that she repeatedly, there was a part where she repeatedly said that Miss Maudie is a friend. And she never used to, associate any other ladies or aunts as a friend. But with Miss Maudie, she was their friend. So that was the kind of open and transparent relationship that they both had. Like, Miss Maudie never used to sugarcoat anything, or she just placed ahead her opinions rather than spreading some kind of gossip.
What quality do you think that she and Atticus shared, the resemblance? What was it with respect to Maycomb, or just in general, the way of life?
I think she was one of the only adult females in the story who didn't try to impose something on Scout. She just accepted Scout as she was.
So you asked the similarities between Atticus and Miss Maudie, right? So
Yeah.
I guess both of these people, they didn't interfere, not only in, as Tarit said, not only in Scout's life but also in general. If you see Maycomb's community, it was
Yeah.
a lot interactive. ये you will ऐसे है, ये वैसा है. So they didn't do that. They just mind their own business.
They
So
didn't
that is, I guess,
indulge in
similar.
the gossip
Yeah,
or the.
gossip.
Makes sense, yeah.
So if you guys remember, starting में I think Miss Maudie का घर जल जाता है, right? If you remember. So the interesting thing over here was her reaction to all of it. If you remember, she was like, I didn't like this house anyway, I wanted to get rid of it, so ठीक है, खत्म हो गया. So like, what does it tell us about her? Like her reaction and her feelings about the house itself. What does it say about Miss Maudie as a person?
I think definitely it just shows directly, though it shows that she's a very positive person. Like take everything as it comes and just make the best out of it. She was sort of a person, and yeah, I think that was on my mind. Yeah.
But way of life, this is also different because Maycomb, if it would have been some other lady, she would have sobbed a lot and made a scene out of it, And Miss Maudie seemed more like the person who was just like, theek hai, as Nilangi mentioned, if take it as it comes, and like I'll make the better of it. Plus the flowers were saved, I think a part of the flowers. So she's like,
उसको flower से मतलब था,
this is what I love the most about in my house, and they're fine, so I'm cool.
We're talking about now Maycomb as a society, Maycomb as a place. Okay, so I'll start off with one particular incident over here. If you remember, जब Radley के घर पे intruder आता है, as intruder यानी Gem, Scout and everybody else who comes in, the first instinct that the people have, it might be a black person who's there. So from this incident and just the culture or the vibe of the place that was there, what can you tell us about Maycomb as a place?
Maycomb is like any other place on earth right now. The biggest sin we can commit while analyzing this book is pretending that this book belongs to some other time and some other place. These stigmas exist in our society as well. We observe so many times that we categorize some person or put labels on some people, and then we simply accept those labels and let them be without seeing them as humans first.
That's actually true. There was one question we had to actually ask, Avi, that is there any relation between the society that we have today? And that does make sense. Yeah. Yes, Vanshika.
So I agree to Tarit on that point. Another thing is that it was set in 1930s, and America is a place that has had racism for very long. So I think the author herself, with her experiences, like the author says happily, these are her own experiences, some of them, and which she writes. So I think she wanted to reveal the racism in a very subtle way. It was a more like a euphemism, we can say, to racism.
That's true. And also understand the place, if we think about it, यहाँ पे कुछ करने को था नहीं उनके पास में. Like they literally had Radhika told me this, they literally talked about people. They had nothing else to talk about. So इसकी चुगली कर ली, उसने ये किया, it's just all that they could do. And that is why it's understandable that they become this very conservative society.
See, we can have the choicest adjectives to kind of describe maycomb, but the fact is that the smaller a community is, the more the people by hook or by crook work to keep whatever illusion and whatever order which they have established, no matter how weak its foundations are or how questionable morally the foundations are. A society as small as maycomb in 1930s America, with little communication, little travel, little trade, an isolated community will fight to keep what it considers its values and morals and ideals alive, even at the cost of because empathy, universal empathy, is something which is just say a part of the constitution. Like you're that time say the right to vote to women was also a very contentious topic, and the 1960s are still 30 years away, where someone like Martin Luther comes in and talks that why is there, if racism does not exist in America according to the white elites, why is there still segregation? Why is there still, I mean, busing was a big problem even till the 60s. So it's no wonder that the 30s are so, I would say, insular and inward looking.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring that question. What do you think about families following a certain stereotype that was attached to them and to the other families as well? Like children as young as Scout were aware of, the Cunninghams don't take money and they don't have money, and they were okay with it.
So like classics, whenever we read classics, we get a proper background of what is going on in that village or town. May it be Pride and Prejudice, To Kill a Mockingbird, any classic. So but when we talk about other classics, they talk about the other traditions and the festivals that they celebrate. But Maycomb talked only about people and only about castes, which was surprising because they only had one school where all the kind of people used to come and study. Like they didn't have different schools for different people. Like they segregated the whole society. That was different for the school. Everybody came and studied in the same school. So I like that. But Maycomb was mostly all about a routine. Like हाँ ऐसा ही होता है और ऐसे ही follow करना है सब.
Yeah, it was so little that it had only one school, and so little that the only thing they could talk about is people. Also, I found it so ironical, like they sort of made these distinctions as to like this family is like this family is like that, as if God knows they're a different species altogether, when in actuality, as Scout mentioned many times, they're probably related by blood, most of them. So there was this dialogue between Scout and Jem too, in the later end of the book, where Jem says there's a certain way certain people behave, it's specific to each family, and Scout says no, I think all people are the same, they're folks at the end of the day. So what do you think about that?
I was just going to take it. I want to play the devil's advocate over here. I'm going to obviously इसमें हम चाहते हैं कि want to जो Scout बोलता है कि like people are everybody is the same, they are folks at the end of the day. But I believe that people are different. आपको ये मानना पड़ेगा, like I can't just be friends with a South Indian इतनी आसानी से, और it's hard, like that's why it's very hard to intermarry intercaste में या फिर different religion में. आपको मानना पड़ेगा people are different,
Since you're playing the devil's advocate, I will not like attack that, but primarily the thing is that you're different based on a lot of secondary traits. The fundamental things that I think, like about honesty, integrity, or things that if you can align them, then it shouldn't make a difference. If you can bring that at the core, the more involved you are in all these secondary traits of religion, caste, and I know it sounds idealistic, etc., but I think that's where Scout was coming from. Ki, haan, hota hai, everybody has pressures, so they're all folks. They deal in some way, it might not be right or wrong. But yeah.
But like still, that's as you mentioned, it's idealistic. It's not really true. It can't be practical. You know.
It's practical as well, no?
Okay.
Yeah.
Also the fact that Atticus mentioned ना, जब वो speech दे रहा होता है, जब वो I think closing statement दे रहा होता है कि मतलब लोग अलग हैं, I agree, someone is better than the other, but at the end of the day, हम justice court के सामने या फिर constitution के सामने we are all equal, irrespective, and I think that's the point that was there. We'll quickly move on to the next point that is there. It's about so Tariq made me realize that this could be talked about. It is about Mrs. Dubose. So Mrs. Dubose was this very weird character. Like she was there for only काफी लोग ने पहले पढ़े तो उनको याद भी नहीं हो शायद. She was there for some time, बहुत ही annoying सी थी, and then she died, and it's like it's done. So if you guys have your books right now, आपके सामने अगर हो or something, just could you open the page number 124? I'm just going to read this one para or something. 124 पे है. So it goes something like so what happened was this person died, right? This Mrs. Dubose died, and so Jem was like, "यार मुझे क्यों भेजा उसके पास में?" And then she realizes कि मतलब she was a morphine addict and stuff like that, and she was trying to face that. There is a paragraph I'll read quickly. Atticus is telling this. I wanted you to see what real courage is, instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. It's when you know you are licked before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through no matter what. You rarely win, but sometimes you do. Mrs. Dubose won all 98 pounds of her. According to her views, she died beholden to nothing and nobody. She was the bravest person I ever knew. So like Atticus is a person जो अपने words बोलता है तो बहुत सोच समझ के बोलता है. So why do you think Atticus found this person to be the bravest person he ever knew? Like what was the thing about her that made him say this?
Because Atticus admired and was fascinated by the fact that she was fighting a losing battle, and she knew that to give up the addiction would be futile, so she saw it through the end. So the power of belief is what Atticus is praising here.
That's true. I mean, the fact that even if he knew that his case was doomed in a way, but still, yes, I think he's got his inspiration from there maybe. Another perspective that I thought about this could be the fact that Mrs. Dubose was unapologetic about her behavior or her opinions in life, and I think that is what inspired or maybe drew Atticus towards her. Maybe. Tariq will quickly take a point and then we'll move on.
Yeah. Mrs. Dubose was okay. So the battle she won, it did not have any actual tangible outcome per se. It was a battle of principles because she was going to die anyway. She had to make a choice whether she wanted to die with the comfort of morphine, which a lot of non-addicts also do, or she wanted to overcome that problem of hers before she died, and her conviction won at the end of the day, and that is probably why she seemed like a brave person to Atticus.
Okay, let's talk a little about Atticus and the theme of parenting that's there. You know, we can compare over here parenting in relation to Aunt Alexandra also. So firstly, we see Jem, Scout, and Dill go to the court sessions and all also. So tell me one thing from a practical point of view. So do you think it is appropriate for kids to hear a court session on rape accusations where literally details are being laid out?
Depends on the kid.
Dill was not that kid, so
No, I don't think it's appropriate at all because it psychologically damages you definitely in the long run. Maybe not towards when you are like 10 or 11 or 12, but towards the end, it definitely affects you a lot.
if you think about ये movies जो बनती है तो उसमें भी rating दी होती है ना कि you है या फिर adult है तो मतलब there's some logic behind it. Like आप pink नहीं दिखाओगे किसी 8 या 10 साल के बच्चे को. You shouldn't also. I mean I'm saying you shouldn't. If anybody has any different perspective कि मतलब आपको grim realities दिखानी चाहिए बच्चों को as anybody. Yes, Pranav will take your point first.
Yeah, so I would have a contrarian opinion here just for a thought experiment. So imagine there's a like there's an IPS officer or there's a policeman in the house. He's a father and he has a like 7-8-year-old kid, and he shows this kid his gun and says, "This is I used to shoot criminals. This I used." So basically, it's an instrument of violence showing his kid. But the context of an instrument of violence is being used in a righteous sense, where you're using it to fight crime, or you're using it to enforce a certain set of rules which a society agrees upon. That somehow makes it legitimate and makes it a symbol or an icon of pride that, okay, my father is a policeman who wields a gun because he has to. So these people are in a court of law where they're seeing proceedings and they're seeing a system at work which is trying a person accused of rape but they aren't exactly being I understand, I get your point that they'll be exposed to all those nitty-gritties and those details, and maybe that can be something which is avoidable, and the rules should have been enforced more on who is admitted to the court or who's not. But after a point, I mean, that initial moment of sensitization comes in, and when you're sensitized, you are. I mean, there are people who say try to sexually abuse minors and things like that.
Yeah.
So if somebody, God forbid, grows up with that kind of an experience and becomes mature in the wrong sense, I mean, I don't know how that will work with someone's psyche. If we know it's tender, if we know it should bloom in the right way, maybe we can expose them to the darker aspects of society, but in a way in which we can tell them, okay, this happens, this exists, but this is detrimental to like values and virtues and good conduct and ethics.
So what I was saying is that the way things are brought in also makes a difference. Like, they were children of a lawyer, a lawyer. So they looked at it from that perspective. They've grown up understanding this is how, law functions. This is how you're governed. This is how the nitty-gritties happen. That's why, later on also we talk about how Scout is understanding the fact that Tom Robinson is given a fair chance of trial is a step to justice itself. So, and if she wouldn't see the court proceeding, then it's difficult for her to gauge the kind of, things that go around in the courtroom. And still, we talked about this, a negative worldview will not necessarily happen by seeing the bad things of the world. It happens when, after seeing the bad things of the world, nobody gives you a perspective that exists, unfairness exists, but you still have to be a good person, but there's still good to do, which Atticus did in a way. So that's why it didn't seem too problematic.
Kritisha will take your point, and then we'll just. Yeah.
I think I kind of agree with Sankalp on this, but I think every age has a certain innocence, which I think shouldn't be lost. So particularly the example that Pranav gave of a father, it's a father and a son or a father-daughter conversation. So the context is completely different. The thing is, when we take in context, there is a lot of nuance that goes into it. So I kind of agree that you shouldn't tell children, and the faith and the hope being lost, that is true. It does affect your mental health. It can affect you psychologically, permanently, if you see certain things. And also, as a kid, you're just a kid, so you might not have the maturity to understand. So generally speaking, I think the innocence should remain intact.
That's true. Starting, if you remember, Scout also asking ki matlab, what is rape, or I think एक बार भी पूछती है, and then I think Calpurnia was the one, she's like, I can't tell you this, ask your dad, he might be able to tell you properly. So what is the appropriate way to answer these awkward questions or have these awkward conversations with kids? I know it's not a parenting discussion where nobody over is a parent, I suppose actually, but I think Pranav is the closest to become a dad. In terms of the age, God, bro.
He's going to.
I'm sorry. No. Anyways, just let's get back to it. Just trying to make some fun. अगली बार bro तेरे से पैसा नहीं लूँगा, please बख्श ले मेरे को. Anyways, let's focus on the question that I had. What is a good, appropriate way to have these awkward conversations with kids?
To explain that, okay, this thing is something that is gravely wrong, but you're too young to understand it. I'll explain it to you when you are of a mature age. But for now, just know that this is something that is gravely wrong. That is manageable, I think.
That's true.
Yeah. So my question was, when Aunt Alexandra sort of scolds, reprimands Scout and Gemin, for that matter, to behave more like the Finches, and to sort of take themselves as the family name suggests. So Atticus also reiterates that, immediately after that discussion. So what dilemma do you think that he was in? Because he also tells Scout and Jem, you should be a gentleman and a lady, as your aunt said, because you both are Finches and behave like it. So why do you think that he said that?
What I felt was it was a lot to do with the influence that Aunt Alexandra had over Atticus as well. I think he didn't really mean when he said that, but he was like, I don't know what exactly was going through his mind exactly. I think that's a moral dilemma that I'm not able to understand myself. But like, there was some, I think it was the influence that she had over him. And that is why he said that. And that's why I think I remember the reaction that Jem and Scout had. Like, why are you saying this? It's not you who's saying this. Something like that happened. So, yeah.
So I guess at that instant, also because of the hold the aunt has on Atticus, maybe he's in a dilemma that he has. See, even Scout introduces the reader about the past of the Finch family, that they were plantation owners and they had slaves, and they were essentially musk traders and skin traders or something like that, animal skin traders, and then they come to America and they set up plantations, and then you see them in Alabama, and this is a southern state. So that is like maybe for a second Finch would have had that conflict, but Scout literally breaks down and she's aghast as to how her father would even say such a thing. So he suddenly retraces his steps and then kind of says, do what you want. I'm sorry, I shouldn't tell you anything. How you want to be, remold the Finch name in the way you think is most appropriate.
Also, why do you think Atticus can never, give a firm answer to Aunt Alexandra? Like, never share his actual views with her?
So I think that would have happened because since childhood, Aunt Alexandra had a strong, she was very opinionated and she had a strong influence on her siblings in a way. And later on, he might have grown up thinking different things. He would have had his own experiences and his opinion, his point of view must have changed. But to go back to the sister and to tell her that no, she's thinking in a very different way, in a wrong way, when even for 1933 her views were a little orthodox, you can say.
Okay, so let's talk about so Atticus, obviously we know is an amazing father overall, but like, can you point out some shortcomings of Atticus as a father?
Everybody loves him too much, I guess.
You also, I pointed out some.
Yes.
Let's quickly move on to another incident. We'll talk about 2-3 very important incidences that happened. First of all, let's talk about Atticus shooting the mad dog, if you remember that scene. I mean, it's a little off from the original way in which the movie or story is being laid out, right? So, what idea do you think this incident wants to convey to us?
See, so basically, Jem and Scout are kind of aghast and perplexed as to why our father has to endure the scorn of the town for actually trying to take up this case. But when they see that their father is, they've never seen their father as assertive essentially in maycomb society. So when they see him literally kill that rabid dog with a single shot, like they see that okay, our father is that authoritative figure which we always, because they don't understand, because their distinction of society is either it's binary till now, it's good or evil. So to see their father suffering the wrath of society for them is inexplicable, and that goes against that binary reading of society. But when they see their father asserting his own power and people acknowledging their father for who he is or some kind of hidden talents he has or he harbors, which he chooses not to show because of a kind of leadership skill or a kind of progressiveness which he has, where he refuses to be that authoritative dictatorial figure.
The reaction of Jem and Scout to this incident, was it of pride or was it of shock?
I guess it was plain shock at first when they first saw it personally, and then when they talked to Miss Maudie, that time the pride came in when she talked about him being the deadest shot of Maycomb.
I think Scout ke liye immediately that happened, because she was kind of judging him pehle se thoda ki like what is this?
He's
like
plain boring or something like that.
Exactly.
But then they came to know ki kuch hai.
So I want to talk about when the mob shows up, like Atticus is sitting at the jail entrance when Tom Robinson is there. So was it appropriate for Scout and Jem, like Dill was also there, but like we'll talk about them, to show up in front of the mob and then refuse to leave, like to tell their father that no, we won't leave? Was it appropriate?
Yes, they saved 2 lives.
They what?
They saved 2 lives. They saved the life of their father. They saved the life of that prisoner.
That's right. Actually, that makes sense after the story, probably.
Point to this, a devil's advocate kind of a point to this, but like, so see, I understand that he gave all sorts of freedom. Atticus gave all sorts of freedom and liberty to both of them, right? But like don't you think his mildness towards them was also the reason why they became spoiled and didn't listen to him? Like, he's like, please go away. They're like, no, we won't leave. Like, they became stubborn, right? Like, उसकी mildness की गलती है. He had to be more strict as a parent. क्योंकि उसकी बात ही नहीं सुन रहे थे यहाँ पे वो.
Yeah, I think being lenient is a good thing. At the core, Atticus respected the choices his children made. When he first instructed them to go away, and when they refused to go away, he realized that this was a conscious decision made by them, and he respected that conscious decision.
Then they stand up or they think beyond themselves. that is also a good thing that happens because of leniency, and that is why it wasn't really wrong or they weren't spoiled. Next question is related to the mob only. Why do you think Walter Cunningham was in that mob, against a black person, against somebody who's being prejudiced, when he himself kind of is in a situation like that as well, because he's a poor family and everybody in the county knows that.
Okay, so what I understood was कि see, as we discussed this in the previous session as well, caste system वाले में, there's this need for superiority for each and every community, each and every person. So even though Cunningham was poor, he was prejudiced in every shape and form. He knew कि मतलब still I am white, so like I have this sort of a superiority thing that I can play on, because even if अगर आप जैसे बता रहे थे कि मतलब उसमें पूरा ऐसे कास्ट सिस्टम टाइप था यहाँ पे इधर भी, so that's why Cunningham felt that so that he could feel superior from somebody. That is why he demeaned or was against the blacks. Right? Maybe blacks और किसी के लिए होंगे, maybe Chinese के लिए होंगे, और Chinese किसी और के लिए होंगे. So this system remains, and I think it is just a part of it.
Why do you think Atticus took up the case? I mean, apart from the fact that he was appointed it, but why do you think that he went through with it?
I don't think he did a discrimination while picking up the case. Like, usko diya to usne le liya. He did not say no, or he did not, because uske liye that difference between black or white is not something that exists. He respects. So we know with Calpurnia also that she was black, from what I remember. It's been a long time since I read, but she was also black and he respected her a lot. So I don't think that discrimination between black and white existed for him. So the question of rejecting a case that he's appointed to does not come up only at all.
I think he was discharging his duty in accepting the case. For instance, a doctor cannot deny a sick patient medical care. Likewise, a lawyer cannot deny legal relief to someone who is very apparently wronged against.
Okay, so guys, if you have a book right now, could you just open page number 171? So there was this very interesting thing that happened. So this is the scene wherein what happens is that after the full jail wala scene pura hua, and after that they are leaving. The mob also leaves, and then Jem, Scout, Atticus, they all are leaving together. So Jem and Atticus are moving together ahead, and what happens is line says कि Atticus and Jem were well ahead of us, and I assumed that Atticus was giving him hell for not going home, but I was wrong. As they passed under a street light, Atticus reached out and massaged Jem's hair, his one gesture of affection. So why? I mean, was Atticus proud of the fact that Jem was so firm about his ideals? And what was the reason why, even after he was being so rigid, क्यों खुश था वो?
He acknowledged that Jem is being, he's slowly becoming a gentleman, and he's being a mature person that he should be.
Could be. So let's quickly move on to the court sessions wala scene that is there, whatever happens over there. So so there's a lot of things that goes on over here. Again, I'll ask you to open the page 215 if you have your book right now. So on page number 215, there's this small paragraph where it's regarding Tom Robinson's perspective. Okay, so it goes something like this. It occurred to me that in their own way, Tom Robinson's manners were as good as Atticus's. Until my father explained it to me later, I did not understand the subtlety of Tom's predicament. He would not have dared strike a white woman under any circumstances and expect to live long. So he took the first opportunity to run, a sure sign of guilt. A sure sign of guilt. What is this guilt that they're talking about?
I don't think it was more of guilt. It was just like fear, And in the later dialogues in the same page say the same thing. Like Atticus asks, were you scared? He's like, Mr. Finch, if you was a nigger like me, you'd be scared too.
Yeah, I agree with Urja on this. Radhika on this. Maybe the guilt portion was how the jury perceived his running away from the crime scene.
Yes. Okay. So I'll just quickly ask another question regarding Myla. Myla Evil was her name, right? So will you say that it was Myla's fault anywhere in this entire thing that happened? Was it Myla's fault at all?
Kind of, but in one way she was a victim of the society she was living in. She clearly had affection for this man, but then and she fell for that affection in a moment of sheer emotion. But then afterwards, she was told by everyone around her that it was not okay to have these relations, and she was trying to distance herself from that. You can perceive her as guilty, but as Tom Robinson did, I pity her.
See, in the book it's mentioned, Scout mentions that the jury took a really long time to get the entire verdict out, which sort of somehow implies that just like the people in the courtroom, they also did feel that Tom Robinson is innocent, but a part of them knew that charging a black man free when he's being charged of a crime by a white man is something that is just not possible, and that they could be in fact overpowered. The jury would have been disassembled or something.
I'll just try to ask one quiz question. I forgot about those. Let's ask somebody who hasn't spoken till now. Varshita, can I ask you a question? Just a quiz essay question. You remember the character Dill, right? So
Yeah.
what was Dill's real name?
I had read it. I just recently read it. I don't remember.
Anybody else? Asim?
Harris Charles Baker. No, not Baker. What Baker?
Yeah, Baker hai.
Baker है. हाँ, मुझे लगा मैं 13 reasons.
One third right है answer.
Harris भी है.
Harris, हाँ Baker Harris. नाम क्या था?
2/3.
क्या?
Charles.
तू देख रही है, मेरे को पता तू ऐसे दिख
नहीं
रही
है
है.
सच्ची.
Okay, yeah, that's correct. Charles Baker Harris.
Combination कर ले.
On the same page, after she says, like, why should I go to school? Atticus, and when she gives the example of Bob's family, like he just comes to school for the first day and then leaves. So Atticus says, sometimes it's better to bend the law a little in special cases. So what do you think is what is the speciality of the evils that they should be given this sort of a leverage?
See, Atticus said this because she didn't want to go to school.
That's evidence. There. But what was so special about giving them the leverage? Ki kyun theek hai if they don't come to school, the evil?
See, I think it had a lot to do with the fact that, see, if you think about countries like US or UK, social service और ये जो schemes होती है, काफी आप काम नहीं करो तो भी आपको पैसा मिलता है. If you remember Intouchables, maybe if you remember, he was just looking for the money that he could get from उन लोग से एक तरीके से ना. So it just shows कि मतलब these the Cunninghams also, if you remember, उसने बताया था कि these people were the worst hit because of depression, और ये लोग 3-4 साल से काम कर ही नहीं रहे हैं. खाली जो भी पैसा मिलता है वो पीने में खत्म कर देता है. And so it's like these people are already a liability, but like these are a part of the country and they can't really do anything about it. They'll have to serve them somehow or the other, and that is why they had to give them the money. I think so. Nothing more. Social support is the answer to that. Okay, let me just ask you another question regarding the first question that I asked you about Scout and Atticus. So do you think at any point Scout doubted his father because of the peer pressure and the constant rants that they had to hear, that she had to hear?
She did question him directly, right? Like, why are you defending an N-word? I think that's a pretty clear sign of a doubt. But those doubts were alleviated after she talked with him.
That's true.
All right. So we know that after the case, Bob Ewell, he spat on Atticus, and later on he even tried to harm his kids, which fortunately nothing happened to them because of do that. So do you think like Atticus would have blamed his sort of idealistic understanding of maycomb if something would have happened to his children, if Bob Ewell would have harmed them? What would Atticus' reaction would have been then?
I think he would have doubted himself at that point in time. Ki, also because he's a single dad. So he feels कि मतलब मेरी responsibility है. And I think मेरे mildness या फिर मेरे idealistic behavior की वजह से, if my kids are getting affected, then something wrong in me. And मेरे जो assumptions लगा रहा हूँ मैं कि that this guy is just words, he's not going to do anything to my kids, but he actually did that at the end of the day.
Also, a more important question is like, why do you think the sheriff was so insistent on proving that Ewell killed himself?
Atticus was being very objective about it. He was handling it in a very objective manner, and the sheriff was trying to say, okay, no, you need to be a little concerned, okay, that your kid was attacked at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think also it could have been the fact that the sheriff didn't want Boo Radley to come out and be in a trial or something, because he already has had so many issues. This guy was actually trying to save the kids. So अब जाके उसको फिर से बाहर निकालना घर से would have been an issue. That's why he's just telling him no, he killed himself, and I don't think we should bring in Boo Radley or Jem into this.
When we're discussing this, was Atticus wrong in thinking that Jem killed Bob Ewell, or did Bob Ewell actually kill himself through his actions?
I think because of the sheriff's insistence that no, he killed himself, it kind of came off as Boo Radley killed Bob Ewell, as an act of self-defense or like as an act of saving those children. But it wasn't Jem. That came out very, staunchly that it wasn't Jem, and that's why the sheriff was sort of saying, it doesn't matter. Jem doesn't matter. I'm not thinking about Jem.
No, but could we interpret that not even Boo Radley, but Bob Ewell's own karma killed him at the end?
No, but it did seem a little problematic, like how he could have tripped and the knife went in. But it's still a plausible story because Bob Ewell wasn't really liked as much also.
No, means physically Boo Radley would have stabbed him, but still, I mean, Boo Radley stabbed him only because what Bob Ewell was trying to do was wrong.
So if you go to page number 308, if it's possible for you, 308, just a second. Yeah, it's like technically the last page of the book. So 308 there's this really small line. This happens when जब क्या नाम उसका स्काउट बू रैडली को घर छोड़ के आती है और घर से वापस चल के आ रही होती है. So she says something like, as I made my way home, I thought Jem and I would get grown, but there wasn't much else left for us to learn except possibly algebra. So what does this mean basically?
Essentially that they came of age, that they've seen so much, they've been through so much in that 3-year time span that they feel that अभी दुनिया देख ले और क्या ही देखेंगे अभी algebra सीखने. That is, I mean, those are just the mundane motions of life where they'll go to school, they'll have a formal education, and they'll grow up in a formalized legal academic sense. So basically they started with a binary distinction of life, good versus evil, and now their perception of humans and how they shape the world has completely changed in the sense that it's become gray. There's that ambivalence which has set in. Maybe it's premature, we don't know, because that is left to us to decide.
True.
But they now know that the way that they knew the world has shifted forever.
So for Scout and Jem, both Atticus's viewpoint mattered the most. Like the fundamental base of their learning was whatever Atticus answered to their questions. And for a person like Scout, who was very much had the value of reasoning, and she was so curious about everything, she always went to Atticus to ask about it, and his answer would be the final one. Like she didn't learn much from school, but her basic and firm learning that she got, and she knew what was right, was something that she learned from Atticus.
So what do you all think of, what is the significance of the title, To Kill a Mockingbird?
So the best part is, like, I would start with finch, the word finch. Finch, I read about this, that finch is also a name of a bird. So it was, so I just read it on Google before the session, and it's so nicely that she has subtle ways of showing how like only finch was the surname that that showed that their stand was right and they were innocent people standing up for the right thing. And mockingbirds is something that they tried to emphasize, the way, like the line that said, like, they are just birds that sing, and that's why it's a sin to kill a mockingbird, because they just sing and they don't harm anybody. So voicing your opinions is not a sin. That's what I guess it tried to show, that voicing your opinion is not a sin.
So I think it's actually related to the death of Innocence and Nivet, in a sense, where the mockingbird, as it's a musical creature and it only contributes music to the world, and it comes from a sense of Nivet, where to generate and to create that music and to express your existence through music in a world, you are not subject or even exposed to that, I would say, the murky aspects of the human condition. So to kill a mockingbird would be to place your gun, and to aim to place your crosshair at a mockingbird would be to question the role, the impact, and the essence of Nivet in life, and how, if that is lost, then what is created in its void, or what new is generated to replace that innocence and that I would say positivity, that optimism maybe.
Who do you think the mockingbird, that phrase is like for?
Both Boo and Tom, I think so.
I mean, just for the last like 5-10 minutes, we just discussed the writing style of the book. So, was there any particular part of the book that you felt was dragged, or something that you had a problem with? That you couldn't either relate with it, yeah, it didn't have enough impact that you thought it would.
I think part one would put some people off the first half of the book, and I think even the author realized this to a certain extent, because when the court session begins, she summarizes the entire plot up to 10 so far, so that if someone were to open the book at page number 180 and read till the court session end, they would still understand what the book is about.
If certain subplots were developed, like Dubos वाला था या फिर starting में और भी थे बुराडी, but
Mr. Raymond also.
Yeah, Mr. Raymond also. I mean, Mr. Raymond इतना delve नहीं किया था उस पे, लेकिन still, but like, yeah, these subplots were developed till one chapter, 2 chapters in the खींचा था उसको, and then they were completely forgotten after a point of time. Like Dubos obviously mention वापस कभी आया ही नहीं कि उसका क्या impact पड़ा, क्या नहीं पड़ा. बू रैडली का बीच के उसमें एक बारी मेंशन ही नहीं है. Like I actually thought कि last तक वो आने वाला है, लेकिन what was the point of the entire first half of the book?
Same thing, that it was so dragged and we had so many characters. So at first when I tried to read the book years back, when I was trying to read years back जब मेरी English भी खराब थी, तब so many characters on the first page only कि क्या चल रहा है, we have to get some kind of background, right? So it was about maycomb, and consequently it was about its people as well, and there were so many people and so many names. So I guess, yeah, and every subplot that Sankar pointed out was only to show us what kind of character Atticus and Scout were.
Yeah, so I actually believe what I think is not like a major fault, but a small gripe which I have is, from what I've read, I've not read the entire book, but from what I've read is that she's trying to pull off a Thomas Hardy, but she's not able to. So Thomas Hardy is considered to be one of the greatest authors to ever, whenever it comes to describing and weaving and populating a narrative around an entire town, its characters, its people, to humanize even the most mundane of details about people, and to show that the world they inhabit and populate, there is a certain intangible surface area where a person's personality affects the space around him. And since the narrative is through children, but she is also using this literary conceit where Scout is a bit more perceptive, so that she can reflect on those complex aspects of human life around them in Maycomb. So that device where बच्चे को थोड़ा ज़्यादा precocious है और क्योंकि उसको समझ में आते लोगों की चीजें, but उसको सब कुछ नहीं पता, ये conceit और जो उनके आसपास इतना जो complex nature of things जो हो रहा है, उसके विषय में मुझे issue लगता है.
Also another issue relating to that only, the fact that the narrator was a 6-year-old, 6 to 8, आगे जाके 8 साल की हो जाती है वो. So the fact that she was a 6 to 8-year-old narrator, the narration was a little inconsistent, because at times she's able to understand everything, literally everything. She can speak of hypocrisy क्या होता है, ये क्या होता है, वो क्या होता है, and at times she's not able to do that. I just felt that there could be a more simplistic narration to it.
6 to 8 years was too young. Like, she's talking about state legislatures, and she understands when Atticus talks about consent, you should ask a woman for consent, something like that. And she understands all those things, but she doesn't know what's happening around her as such. So I guess the age group that she picked, 6 to 8 years old, was too young. Maybe she could have taken 12 to 15 as a range.
Because we've sort of had sessions on Khalid Hussaini as well. Like, what was something that may have glued you to his book that this didn't? What differences did you find?
I read The Kite Runner and To Kill a Mockingbird consequently, so like in quick succession originally. And I found both books to be very emotionally impactful. I didn't find To Kill a Mockingbird any less than The Kite Runner. Some people say that this has been widely regarded as the second best book of the 20th century. The first one was called Ulysses, and I can see why people would think that.
The basic change that I saw in both of them was this was written as on the first name, not first name, like what do you call it? Now I'm forgetting grammar.
First person.
First person. So yeah, so basically it brings about a lot of change that way only when you are reading somebody else's book. And I personally am inclined towards books that are written on first person basis. So it kind of changes a lot of things. You start seeing things with their perspective, and that was her main motive, that you see it from her perspective. That's why she wrote it in first person basis.
Makes sense. Makes absolute sense. In fact, at some point, I think, starting as many people, I think Sankat, you also said this, that, it was a little difficult to sort of understand the setting of the situation, and I think that's primarily because of the cultural differences. In Khalid Hosseini's book, you were easily able to understand because it's a lot closer to home.
And like also
in a
US
sense.
ka bhi, it's a southern part of US. So very Alabama is
Exactly.
very different from New York.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I think the only reason I could go through the first half of the book was obviously firstly because session rakha tha isliye. Apart from that, obviously because I had watched Forrest Gump once or twice, so I knew what Alabama was like a little bit. I knew about it, इसलिए I didn't find it very jarring. Otherwise अगर मैंने नहीं देखी होती तो I couldn't have understood कि ये कौन सा US की बात कर रहे हैं लोग. But the reason why खालिद की book इतनी ज्यादा impactful होती है कि मतलब अचानक से कुछ हो जाता है, लाइक 2 साल आगे बढ़ गए या ये मर गया अचानक से, लाइक या ऐसी यू टू अज्यूम इट. यहाँ पे ऐसा नहीं हो रहा है. आई एक्सपेक्टेड इट टू हैपन, इट्स नॉट हैपनिंग. द ओनली शॉक वाज कि मतलब माइला वाज द वन हु सॉर्ट ऑफ किस्ड दिस गाय. दैट वाज द ओनली शॉक दैट वाज देयर, राइट? So like I felt कि that's the reason why it's not that intriguing, but at the same time it's the same amount of thought provokingness that is brought in over here.
Also, one thing that stuck out to me a lot about the book was Harper Lee has mentioned a lot of racist slurs and sexist comments which are subdued, but she hasn't addressed the solutions of those. She leaves it as if this is just how it is supposed to be.
Final question पूछता हूँ फटाफट, एक दो क्वेश्चन. चल पार्थ को पूछता हूँ. पार्थ, is Maycomb a real place? It's a fictional town. It's a fictional town.
Yeah, just one thing. I think before part 1 starts, there's a quotation written in the book. Lawyers are supposed were children once. What does this mean?
I personally, because lawyers are questioning with no sort of assumption. They're not supposed to lead on to a certain kind of answer. So I think in that perspective, you could say, like they can be assumed as children. They're simply questioning, Acha, why did you do it? What happened? This, that, probably. I mean, that's what comes to my head first.
I just had a question, like Indian background पे set ऐसी ही कोई book है क्या? If anyone else knows about it.
If you want to watch a film on caste, so it's similar. There's a court case and there's a caste atrocity. You can watch Akrosh, which we discussed in the last, but I don't think it's like completely similar to Kill a Mockingbird.